Hi guys, welcome to Barbie's Diary, and I'm so glad to see you guys here today. And I'm sure you're here because you clicked the title on this video, which is dealing with pain and suffering. For those of you who are new here, my name is Bami, and I am basically a realignment coach, and I would say a life experience expert. And yeah, I just have bags of wisdom to pour out and just encourage you on your journey and keep you going, because life can be really hard, but with God all things are possible. And with that, I have a little collection that I want to show you. I'm excited, and you can purchase this merchandise, which is her. This is the her collection, and all of these are available on Amazon. I will put the link below. This is pretty much to the effect of the podcast. So if you are new here, you can go and check out the podcast, and they basically speak on the chapters in this book. And what we're doing is trying to realign ourselves back into the will of what God has for our lives. We're trying to find ourselves in a place of understanding and peace and all those lovely things, that we all desire out of life, but life isn't really showing us right now. And sometimes it could just be we're in misalignment. Sometimes we're not aware of our purpose, and sometimes we just live empty lives because we haven't discovered who we truly are. So we are on the journey of this 2024. We are on the journey of self-discovery, realignment, re-understanding of who we are, and an acceptance to the bad, the good, the ugly, everything that comes our way, and understanding that we are going to attract and radiate positivity, and we are going to build on our character and be the best possible version of ourselves. We're basically starting over this year, so I really like to welcome you on this journey to starting over, and I hope that you stick around and follow, subscribe, and just keep coming back. I hope and pray that God will touch your heart along this journey. So today I'm gonna do my little makeover like I usually do. I will be going out a little later. I keep telling you guys, I'm trying to date myself here in this season. I'm trying to be like much more intentional than I was in my 20s. If you are new here, I am in my 30s. I just turned 30 last year. My story is one that I will share one day, but it's quite winded. If you listen to the podcast, you get bits and pieces of it, but you get to get the full development soon. So today we are talking about dealing with pain and suffering. This is something that I would say we all know too well. And as women, we know too well. We were birthed into a place where women we are looked down on. We are not really appreciated by the men or even by people in our lives. And by nature, women have it quite hard, a lot harder than men anyway. So because of that reason, the pain that we are experiencing and the suffering and all the hard things, it tends to wear us down, causes inflammation in the body. And today I just want to talk about how to deal with that pain, really, how to experience pain, how to go through it. I mean, you can't really run away from some pain that we experience in our lives. Some is there for a reason, and over time you get to discover what the reason is. But what we can do is navigate our way around the idea of how to overcome pain eventually. Now, the meaning of pain is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage, and or described in terms of damage. So basically, in the less wordy sense of things, it's a sensory pain or emotional pain or an experience that causes some sort of damage in you. It could be mental damage, emotional, physical, pain in general. The outcome is damage. So there are many ways, and many ways around pain, many experiences that you have that can be classed as very painful. Now, pain can be mental or physical. I need you to understand that it isn't just a one-way street when it comes to pain. It can come in different ways. We have pain, when you have body pain, aches, and all those kind of things. But then the biggest, and I feel like one of the most difficult and not talked about types of pain is mental pain. Like we ignore, we glaze over, we try our hardest to fight those battles that we don't discuss, the silent battles, but we know that those are one of the most painful experiences that we all have till date. Now, many feelings of pain we have, it could be different things. We have pain that stems from grief and sorrow and sadness. So we know that we experience pain when we either lost something or someone. And I always say lose ourselves as well, because you experience pain when you lose yourself. People don't like to address losing yourself as grief, because we only think about grief as we lost a human being, a person on this earth, someone that was valuable, but you too, you matter as well. So when you lose yourself, that's also some level of grief. When you're also rebuilding and realigning yourself, that is also some level of grief too, because the old part of you is dying and the new part of you is being reborn. So essentially, somehow we, at different stages of our lives, we find ourselves grieving and having to deal with sorrow, sadness, and depression. Another way or another form of pain that we kind of don't really think about is intense long periods and seasons of distress, which causes pain. Now, how I'd like to describe that is when you find yourself in a place or in a position or in an environment where it isn't suited for you, your mind begins to program itself like this is the norm, and you begin to feel pain because your body isn't comfortable with this norm that you're trying to put it through. And then you start to develop, emotional feelings, like heavy emotions that you can't really understand. And then obviously sometimes you have to conceal how you're feeling, maybe because of where you are at that moment in time, maybe because whoever you may be with, or maybe if it's family, they might not understand. And then you develop some sort of distressing outcome. So you could develop inflammatory from it because your body doesn't like it. And another way to tell that your body doesn't like something is your gut really just speaks to you. Like if you're having digestive issues, that is your gut telling you that something is wrong somewhere. Where you are right now isn't the place for you. So I would say seek help, seek assistance, look at ways around how to figure out what exactly in your life is causing that uncomfortable distressing feeling. Another form of pain that sometimes we feel is the pain of loneliness and isolation. Now, this is one that actually is popular, especially with old people, because I remember they used to say old people they die earlier when they're lonely, or like if they lose a spouse or a loved one, they tend to pass away quicker because they've lost someone important to them. And loneliness it kills, and now it's starting to kill younger people too, because Lord knows that it can get very lonely in this world if you have no one to, share with, or even just have a companion. It kills. It's painful. It's not a nice experience to be lonely. It's one that many people are just, using or hiding under the belt of, oh, I can do all by myself, or I'm fine by myself. And we especially women, we do independent women all the time, and that independent woman ain't working for you. We were called to be around people, to be companions, to be helpers. You can't help like, just yourself. You have to help people. In order for you to be a helper, there has to be someone around to help. Another thing that causes pain is negative emotions. Now, this is all kinds of emotions, anger, feeling bitter, resentment. It causes pain. It causes pain. And this is pain that people don't talk about. Like, for example, if you hold someone in your heart, over time, I don't know if you feel it, but you start to have some kind of chest pain because you've been holding on to that person for so long, and your spirit is trying to tell you to let go, but you don't want to. And those kind of feelings, they cause some level of pain, and to actually develop a way out of that pain is usually hard, because the root of the problem is actually unforgiveness, and we'll get deeper into how to deal with all those things. But yes, panic also causes pain. So for anyone who's had a panic attack, you know that this is a form that causes pain. Like if you're having a panic attack, or if you're worried or you're anxious about something, it does give you some level of discomfort, therefore leading to pain. Then you have other emotions such as rage. Rage is part of anger, which is also a negative emotion which causes pain. You already know when you're angry, you are irrational and you do things, you think of things, you create scenarios. Overthinking is another negative emotion that causes pain, because when you start to overthink and over process things that are not even happening, you start to imagine it. And I feel like for our overthinkers out here, like we already create like five scenarios out of the one situation has happened. I know I have a tendency to do that before anything has even hit ground. I've already like I've already thought about five, six things that could have happened, and I'm already like anxious and nervous, and I'm like, so what am I gonna do? Trying to look for my way around. And most times we find ourselves having more pain because we're trying to fix the problem, we're trying to figure out where we went wrong and what is actually causing that pain. Now, shame is shame is one of those things that cause pain. Now, I feel like the pain comes from the embarrassment. I feel like the pain comes from feeling not 100%, feeling like you're not good enough. Like it's not a nice feeling to feel shame, and it also comes externally as well. It's what will people think, what will people say. It's a thing of, oh, or maybe what people are currently saying actually, because shame can also stem in different ways. But shame also causes pain because, well, you can't carry on your day to day, your mind is overworking itself trying to either figure out a solution to a problem, or just trying to even just lie to you and tell you that, okay, you're not good enough because of this scenario, that scenario. Now, the other side of pain and suffering is suffering. Now, we've spoken about pain, but we don't really analyze that suffering and pain are two independent things. Pain is the beginning, suffering is the outcome of the pain. And suffering is the state of undergoing pain, distress, or hardship. And essentially, it's a very broad experience. So suffering can be deemed as anything. What you can take, I probably might not be able to take. What I can take, you might not be able to take. And that's why it poses itself in different formats. And that's why someone cannot really truly be able to 100% identify with your situations, your pains, the experiences that you've had. Not because they're wicked or evil, just because they might not fully be able to embody or understand that which you have been through. And at times we find ourselves having to explain to people the pain that we went through, and some people could be potentially judgy about it and be like, oh well, I can't seem to relate. If it was me, I'd be able to handle it. But for you, you're thinking, but it was something that really was hard for me to deal with. It's something that I'm still working through. But having to explain that to people who probably haven't walked a mile in your shoes, can be hard. It can be really difficult. And aside from walking a mile in your shoes, it can also be really hard to explain that to anyone who doesn't process pain the way you do, who doesn't process suffering. Suffering is a selective thing. It's, you know, it is basically based off each person. It's based off who you are, based off who I am. So I can't tell you that your level of suffering is enough for you to learn your lessons. Only God can determine, what we go through and how it would impact us, whether negatively or positively. And that's why we have isolated, independent journeys that we are on. And suffering, shows up in different forms. It can be emotional, mental, physical. It can affect your body. Long periods of suffering. I said this in one of my podcasts previously, but long periods of suffering can really take you into places of illness and inflammatory and all these things, and you could end up developing autoimmune diseases from stress. So if you know that you are in a stressful environment, maybe a stressful relationship or a stressful home or even a stressful school place, try to minimize as much stress as you can, because honestly, illness is real. It is very real to feel ill, to fall sick, and we don't talk about it. And I feel like the Black community as well, we glorify suffering in general, like, oh yes, suffer, yay, like, oh, this person suffered. Like, we actually sometimes to an extent glorify it, but you need to really kind of figure out the source of that suffering and go around it. Try to find out how ways to minimize and avoid suffering. It will only just make, one, your life easier, but also two, it will make you get to a place where you can truly be able to handle the seasons of pain that develop in your life. Now, the different types of suffering we're going to break down, and why it's important, because when you look back at when you are suffering or when you're going through pain, you can really identify what the root of the problem is and tackle it so it doesn't progressively get worse, or you don't sit in a state of depression, anxiety, worry, and all this negative. Now, physical pain. We know physical pain is resulting from injuries, all sorts of illnesses, chronic illnesses and conditions. For some people who have illnesses, autoimmune diseases, Um, I do, and I'm getting it under control by God's grace. But with those kind of illnesses, you have to manage the pain. Sometimes when I do get pain, I have to take painkillers. I have to nurture the seasons I'm in. If I'm in a peak period of, or a high season of a flare up, I have to watch my butterfly rash when it comes up and try to really manage it and manage the pain that comes with it. Now, is it something easy to deal with? Thank God for painkillers, but over time, it can put a lot of discomfort and even stress on the body itself over time, wearing out the organs and all of that. Now, another form of suffering is emotional distress. Now, this is a big one because we don't actually sit down to really think about that this is something that really impacts our lives. Feeling of sadness. When you feel sad, it really does cause distress in your body. It shakes up everything, and it makes you feel so heavy and weighed down, and it's essentially a form of suffering. We don't think about it, but it is suffering. It's an emotional form of suffering. And now we live in a world where people talk about mental health all the time, and it is part of it. When you look at mental health and you look at the things that people go through, when they feel sad, they feel anxious, they feel grief, they feel anger, they get to a place where they're emotionally distressed, and that then over time turns into suffering. Mental suffering. Now, this one is self-inflicted sometimes. Well, majority of the times is self-inflicted. This is based off your thoughts. And if you watched the last video about self-love, we spoke about the importance of having affirmations and thinking positively about yourself, because that's very important for you to be able to manage your emotional and mental side of things. In order to manage your well-being, your mental well-being, the mental health of yourself and your environment and your surroundings, and even how to nurture people around you, you have to start with you first. Now, mental sufferings and anything mental in general is your thoughts. So this is negative thoughts about yourself, the worries and self-doubt that you have, some level of crisis, existential crisis. This is crisis that like makes you feel like, what's life about? Is there more to this life? Like, what is the more to this life that I'm looking for? And this usually happens to us when we get to places and stages in our life where we are in seasons of stagnation for a very long period of time, or maybe we've desired something for so long and it's still not coming through, or maybe we finally received that thing that we've desired but it didn't come out the way we imagined. And then we find ourselves in this place where we start to wonder what the meaning of life is. Is there more to life? Feeling of emptiness and not incomplete. Lastly, we're looking at spiritual turmoil. Now, this is one, if you are a Christian or if you have some sort of spiritual beliefs and faith, this is something that you can really say that you probably relate to in seasons where maybe you've prayed for something and God hasn't really given you exactly what you want, or God hasn't presented you with what you've desired or what you've wanted. So you then find yourself in seasons where you're suffering because you're having crisis. Is my faith real? Is God real? All the values I'm upholding, are they worth upholding these values, or is there still a lot more work I need to do on myself? And this then takes you to a place of searching for fulfillment, searching for peace, searching for kind of safety, and searching for a place that will give you hope. And that's why we go to church. That's why we listen to sermons and listen to like mentorships and faith talks to encourage us and remind us that, okay, this feeling you're feeling is temporary. Suffering is something that is going to be temporary, but you need to grow through it. Figure out why you are suffering in this season. Is it self-inflicted? Can you tackle it? If it is something like mental, you can be able to tackle it. You need to go back to affirmations, pray, speak words of positivity onto yourself. Now, here we have reached a point where it is the most important part of this podcast. This is dealing with pain and suffering. Now, I don't know how to tell you this, so I don't know, but pain and suffering is part and parcel of life. It is part and parcel. Like, if there's anything that is guaranteed in this life, it is pain and suffering. It is part and parcel. It comes with the territory of life. As far as you're alive and you know that you're living, for you to be able to experience things, there's pain and there's good and there's bad. Just like everything, the good and the bad, the yin and the yang, as they would say. Pain is something that you will experience. Suffering is something that you will experience because it is part of the process. Without that kind of pain and that experience, how would you know what is good? How would you know whether even something is for you? Because without the pain, you can't really make judgment of where to place it and what it does or what it's meant to do. Now, dealing with pain and suffering is something that many people probably might not have an understanding that there's a way around, but there is. It's not a perfect way, and you might have to, try different methods, but try. At least don't give up on yourself, still try. So, the first thing to do when you're trying to deal with pain and suffering is to acknowledge and accept. Acknowledge the situation you're in, acknowledge the place you are in, acknowledge where you are. Don't tell yourself that, okay, you know what, it's fine, I'm just going to ignore it and sleep through this and you'll get better. No, acknowledge where you are right now. Okay, acknowledge and tell yourself, right, currently I'm in this place, I'm feeling pain, and it could just be from everything else in your life, but currently this is what life is dealing with you, this is what life is giving you, this is the hand that life is dealing with you right now. And acknowledge it, accept it, acknowledge it. Acceptance makes you process things easier. It makes you kind of almost have some level of understanding that, okay, this is why it had to happen. So acceptance also makes it easier to go through. If you are accepting of something, then you are just able to fall through it, rather than having to fight your way. "Ah, I don't want to suffer this month." When you start to accept it, you give your brain room to breathe. When your brain has room to breathe, then your brain begins to look for solutions on how to deal with the suffering. Another way of dealing with pain and suffering is accepting compassion for yourself. I know that we all, as human beings, we have the ability to be empathetic towards somebody else and sympathize with them, but we lack the ability to sympathize with ourselves. We are so critical and hard on ourselves. We are very, very much like headstrong. We have to have it this way all the time. And sometimes you have to accept that in certain seasons you have to be sympathetic to yourself, you have to be empathetic to yourself, you have to be compassionate towards your plight, because only then can you then be able to say to yourself, okay, I've experienced things, and you'll be able to know that, okay, this is the reason why I experienced it. If you're not compassionate to yourself, eventually you will find less compassion towards people. You won't be able to empathize with them, because you will say to yourself, "Shebi, I experienced this. Shebi, I went through it. Shebi, it wasn't. Shebi, it wasn't that bad." And that's what people do. You will just say to yourself, "Ah, but she's acting as if it's nothing major. I went through it." But when you are able to be compassionate towards yourself, then you can now accept others and be compassionate too. Practice mindfulness. Stay present in the moment. If you are in a season of suffering, do not try to run away from it. Do not try to look for other ways to take your mind off it temporarily, because it will come and catch you in a place where you least expect. And for me, whenever I come to a place where I'm feeling like, oh, I'm suffering and stuff like that, I try to run away from it. I tried to use many vices to take me out of it: drinking, going out in places I shouldn't be, doing things I shouldn't be doing, finding myself in places and seasons where I shouldn't originally find myself. And in those times and in those places and in those seasons, you have to think deeper to what effect God has planned for you, what God is trying to teach you and grow you in that season to do. Stay present in the moment. Observe your thoughts. Observe, observe, observe. Always look into what you're thinking. Observe the current season that you're in. Try to really feel what you're going through when it comes to feeling pain and suffering. Because when you feel and you allow yourself feel it, you're not running away from it. You're not running away from those problems. You're not trying to look for ways to sugarcoat things. All you're trying to do in that season is just get through it. And just like for me, in a season where I had so much pain and suffering, I used to always look for vices to run to and run out of. And I would look for vices, things to do. I would look for ways to ignore the problem and just let it go away and just not feel that pain that evening or that day or that week. Look for ways around it. But the truth of the matter is, when you allow yourself fully process and you allow yourself fully accept and grow your mind in that season, then only can you be able to see and envision and like kind of hold your head up high and see beyond the problem. When you're in a season where everything is messy, 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 when you sit down, you process, you accept what's going on, you're present in the moment, you are able to at least create a plan around it. And then from there, you can decide what is for you and what isn't for you. Seek support. Now, dealing with pain and suffering isn't something that is easy, and we live in a world where people don't like to share what they're going through. I'm not gonna lie to you, being African as well, I'm sure like maybe your aunties, your mom, or someone in your family would have told you that my sorrow, Jewel, don't talk too much, don't tell people what you're going through, you don't know who the enemy is behind your back, all that stuff. Everyone is always telling you be careful of who you share with. People don't care about your plight or what you're experiencing or what you're going through. So you too, you become very concerned about who to share with, you become very secretive, you always look down on how, people that want to help you. But I'm not saying go around sharing your gist all the time, or please be very guided and minded and cautious. But you do need a friend or a community in seasons when you are dealing with pain and suffering that will be able to encourage you and lift up your spirit and tell you that everything's going to be okay. This is just part and parcel of your journey. This is the part where it doesn't always look so fancy, but at the end of this, there is a joy coming. For you to experience joy, you have to experience some level of pain to know that, okay, this is joy and this is pain. Just like we compare colors, how do you know that one is lighter than the other? You have to see the two of them together to be able to differentiate what the difference is and what works for you. Then I would say that dealing with pain and suffering, engage in self-care. Now, our last video, our last two videos is about self-love. I will post the link down below, and I think you need to engage in actually caring for yourself. Give yourself time. Learn to nourish your body, give yourself good food, eat well, try to take control of the mental. The physical appearance also helps. If you can muster the courage in that season to go to the gym, go. It might uplift your spirit, your mood. It might not necessarily help you 100%, but what it will do is it might uplift your mood in that season, and just keep yourself in a mental state that is healthy. And self-care is one of those things that does that. I mean, when I learned how to start doing self-care and taking care of myself and reading and taking time out to find and discover myself, I started finding out that no matter how bad I was suffering, I could always channel all my energy into something else other than worrying about the problem. Find meaning. Now, this is a very good one when it comes to suffering and pain, because you need to find meaning in what the situation is. Why are you suffering in this season? Are you the cause of your own suffer? Because many people also don't realize that they are the cause of their own suffering sometimes. So, for example, that guy that you refuse to let go, that keeps maltreating you, and you keep holding on to him and holding on to him, and every time you go back he maltreats you, and you start feeling suffering and pain, and you're like, God, why? You're the cause of your own suffering, because God has given you way out already, but you just don't want to accept it. Look at the meaning behind it. Is there a lesson, an opportunity for growth, or is it just an opportunity for more suffering if you continue in that same stride? You need to figure out what the meaning of what you're experiencing and what the season you are in is about. Maybe it's just a season of suffering so that it can then lead you or build a character inside you that will grow you. For me, I feel like my character was kind of improved on and defined heavily when I was going through my season of suffering, simply because then it taught me how to, one, persevere. No matter how much I would get no's and I would get really like sad situations, I would persevere and keep pushing, keep pressing on, because it didn't matter how I was feeling. I wasn't bothered. I wasn't trying to even find how anybody else was feeling in that moment. I was like, as long as I do what God has set me to do, I'm blessed. Now, another way of dealing with pain and suffering is to define the source of the pain and set boundaries. Please set your boundaries. When you define the source of the pain and where the pain is coming from and why you are in that season of suffering, start creating boundaries. I say this because I said earlier that for some of us, we create our own pain, we create our own negative situations, we create our experiences. And if you are saying that, oh, I'm currently finding that I'm in so much pain and the pain is too much and I'm experiencing a lot, and it could just be from a situation that you keep returning back to, create a boundary around it. Create a boundary around it. If it's a relationship that's not working out, create a boundary around it. If it's a friendship that's not working out, create a boundary around it. The more boundaries you create, you also, one, create respect for yourself. Two, you create an avenue where people begin to understand that you can't be taken for idiots. And most importantly, you yourself begin to allow yourself, look through the pain that you're feeling and say, can I really escape this particular pain, and is this pain worth it? Is it actually worth the experience you're going through? Do you have to suffer in it, or can you just get rid of it? And I don't mean get rid of people, just try to minimize the situation that is causing pain. Another way of dealing with pain and suffering is to seek help. Now, this can come in different formats. Therapy is a very good one. I have a therapist, and she is absolutely amazing. Um, she really just talks me through experiences, and even some experiences that I choose to bury in the back of my head. She'll ask me questions like, how did that make you feel? Feelings that you don't actually consider, because in that moment you're not thinking about how does it make me feel. You're thinking about, I finna punch, I finna fight. Like, you're not actually processing how something is making you feel. If we think about all the situations we find ourselves in, and even situations that are causing us pain, if we look at how it makes us feel, it gives us an idea of whether it's good for us or not, and how we can now start looking for solutions around it. I say this because for anyone who's in situations that are not suiting them best, or boxes that don't fit them best, this is, being in places that are starting to really affect your mental. When you look at it, and you look at it head on, you're like, oh, I don't think there's anything I can do about it. I don't know if there's a way forward. But with help and guidance, you can decide whether it's even something you need to move forward from, or something that you need to sit in, stew in, and grow into, or grow ahead of. Sometimes we find ourselves like struggling to grow around situations. Whenever something is hard, the first thing we're like, "Oh, I want to get rid of it, I want to get rid of it." But when you allow yourself grow, you begin to discover that, okay, is this really for me? Am I in the right place? Am I not in the right place? And then having someone to support you, guide you, can either give you validation on your perspective or your solution, or even probably give you a different perspective, maybe a bird's eye view of the situation, a view that you haven't considered. Also, sharing with a professional can also help, because it can alleviate the amount of pressure on you, because of sharing is caring, and there is no judgment, sharing with someone who doesn't know you. If you're sharing with a professional, if you decide to share with family or friends, it's also your choice. But just remember that when everything is all said and done, whoa, it is your head it will land at the end of the day. Now, dealing with suffering effectively is a combination of self awareness, self care practices, and seeking support. Now, self awareness is a very big one. I just spoke earlier about understanding that the root of what's causing your pain and suffering. And sometimes, like I say, we are the root of our pain and suffering. We are definitely the root of it. And most times we choose not to discover what the problem is, or we even ignore it. Like I said, if you're seeing that guy and he's not treating you well, and you continue to go and go and go, you are the cause of your pain and suffering. So every time when you call your friend to be complaining and complaining, and she's tired of hearing you complain, because you're the cause. And when you realize that you are the cause of it, you are able to then be aware, what is actually the main issue here? Why can't I let this guy go? Why can't I let this negative situation that isn't serving me best go? Then you begin to see that maybe you're stemming from abandonment issues, or even just the ability not to be alone because you're fearful, or maybe just because of the fact that at one point maybe you had no purpose and no way forward, and now it's become your norm to be with people that maybe they just see you more than you see yourself in that season. But being able to tackle and understand that this is the actual problem beyond this guy that you keep running back to, or this group of friends that don't necessarily make you feel 100%, but you just want to feel like you have people. Being able to understand and being aware of why you are doing what you're doing can help alleviate some of that suffering. Also, having self-care practices can help. Taking time for yourself, having a journal, writing down your experiences, because sometimes it's easy that we forget. We are human beings, so we forget when bad things happen. It's easy for us to say, oh, it didn't really happen, it wasn't too bad, I could manage. And we lie to ourselves all the time. We women especially, we are fond of lying to ourselves. We put ourselves in boxes that don't fit us, and then we're always saying, oh, it's okay, it's not too bad. And then years down the line, we wonder why it didn't work out, or why we are feeling sick, ill, why we are having to now deal with the end repercussion of a situation that we nursed for way too long. Now, another way of dealing with pain and suffering is to express yourself. Do not keep any of your feelings like internally. Express it. And I'm not saying going around having a rage, having a rant and a chinwag and telling people, can you imagine, blah, blah, blah. No. Express yourself. Express yourself in your art. Express yourself in your words. Express yourself to yourself. Express yourself in ways that you can learn to love up on yourself. Express yourself in how you are feeling. Take time to talk to yourself. Have an inner voice that you talk to. How are you feeling today, Bami? How's everything going? Are you feeling great? Is your mental okay? What has hurt you today that's made you feel like you don't feel 100%? You woke up this morning, you were a bit down. Why? Is there something that you did yesterday has changed your entire perspective on today? If so, how can you improve? Develop a healthy relationship with yourself so that when you are expressing yourself to yourself, you don't think that you're crazy. That way, you can also begin to make some sort of judgment on whether you are even in the right place at the right time or whether you need to change something. Lastly, I would say express and practice gratitude. Gratitude is something that you need to learn to do. It is hard to be grateful, but you can be grateful. It is hard. Yes, it is definitely hard to remain grateful, especially when everything around you isn't reflecting that gratefulness that you need to be, having. But when you are grateful and you are looking at the positive aspects of your life, you then open a door for more positive things to happen. You then open the door for your mind to be able to accept willingly good things happening to you. If you stay in a midst of situation of negativity, all your mind is going to process is the negative. And when you process the negative, you will not even find a solution to your situation. All you just continue to do is rumor around in your mind and say, oh, this situation is not going to change, this. But when you process gratitude, you are able to look for the good in things, the good in your day. Okay, I may not have a lot, but what happened today that was good? Oh, my bus came on time. I didn't have to walk to work because my colleague picked me up. You look at little things that are gratitude, things that you can hold on to and say, yes, this is great. And this also gives you an idea of beauty in the world. Therefore, you don't lose that sense of, am I even in the right place? Is life even life? You get a grounding towards life is beautiful, life is amazing, and this is just what it is for now. Now, for me, I feel like there are other ways to deal with pain and suffering, and I always go back to what I stand heavy on the word of God. I stand heavy on that. And one of my favorite Bible verses to deal with when you're going through pain and suffering is Romans 5:3-5. And it says, not only so, but we also glory in our suffering. We also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. And this hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured out onto our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given unto us. Now, this Bible verse is basically just talking about how our suffering is a glory to the testament of who God is. And this is word. This is really word because God's glory is immaculate. Like everything that we are experiencing, it is meant to happen. You are meant to experience this pain. You are meant to experience everything because it builds your character. It builds perseverance. You learn to be more patient, more kind. You're learning many things. And our relationship with God is supposed to basically be the end all and be all. Why we are here on this earth is to show God's glory so that people can get to experience God. When you think about when people give testimonies, you're always like, wow, I can't believe this happened. Oh my gosh, God is amazing. God is wonderful. How would we get to that place where we believe that God is wonderful and we develop authentic love for God if we do not go through situations and suffering that God needs to save us from? How do we not sit down and awe and marvel at God's wonder if we're not in situations of pain and suffering? Another Bible verse to consider is 1 Peter 5:10. And after you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will restore himself, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. Now, this just talks about how suffering is only temporary. Pain that you're feeling right now is only temporary. All these pain and experiences that you're feeling, that you're thinking you're never going to overcome, it is a temporary situation. It is nothing final. It's not a death sentence. It is just a temporary situation that you will overcome. because God has already overcome all of this. And it says, God Himself will restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. So it's not the end of the world, it's just the beginning. And this experience that you're feeling, it has to happen. I always like to tell people that every pain, suffering you're going through, there's a reason for it. There is something to learn, there is something to grow into, and there's a part of you that needs to be able to accept God's, I guess, God's way in this particular season. It might not necessarily be the greatest, but it's God's way. Now, in conclusion, suffering is a personal and deeply subjective situation. You cannot compare what you've suffered to someone else. You cannot compare what someone else has suffered to what you suffered. You can't sit down and say, if I was her, I would do it better. I would this, I would, because you don't know. You don't know where someone's shoe is pinching. That's why we are different sizes, different weights. We have different, our bodies, the entire makeup of our bodies is completely different. So you cannot compare your suffering to someone else's suffering. I think one of the most insensitive things we do as humans, even me too, I've done it before, when we hear someone's story, we are so quick to judge and say things like, if it was me, I wouldn't do it like that. If it was me, da 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 da. And suffering is subjective. You don't know what the person felt like that it made them do what they did or experience what they did or react the way they did. It is essential to acknowledge, address, and seek support and navigate through pain and suffering effectively. Not quickly, not rushly, but effectively. When you sit down and you find a way to go through the pain effectively, you are able to, one, learn the lessons, find a solution, and then also when you find other people in the same place and position that you are, you can guide them through as well. Understand the nature of suffering is is life, is the reality of the life and the world that we live in. It isn't great, but it is life. And look for coping strategies. Just like I said, look for gratitude, ways to, sit in a place of positivity through gratitude, maybe writing down notes. Look for people around you that will keep you happy and grounded and encouraged. Look for support in therapists and people around. Look for, a way forward and solutions. But the only way you can even ground yourself in a solution is to be, one, aware of where you are, how you're feeling your emotions, to accept what you're experiencing, and then to grow through it. Another way and way of dealing with the pain and the suffering is to cope, heal, and grow from challenging experiences. Yes, growth is very, very important. You need to learn how to cope with the pain, how to grow, how to heal. No matter the amount of pain you're experiencing now, is nothing compared to the joy coming in front. But if you don't allow yourself to grow and learn from the experience, if you don't allow yourself to heal, you'll bleed on other people around you. And if you don't learn how to cope, you will crumble at any single future impending problems that might come ahead. And lastly, by implementing these coping strategies, you might find that you deal with pain easier. But if you are still struggling through long periods of pain, please seek assistance. Please seek help. Don't be afraid to call out for help. Don't be too independent woman that you don't want to ask for help. I remember when I got to a place where I was too fearful to ask anyone of help. I dealt with it on my own and the pain was 10 times worse, until eventually when God kind of allowed me to see that, okay, this particular person is in your life in this season to help. Then I could be more vulnerable, then I could pour out myself and not feel like I was in a funny place. I just felt like, okay, you know what? I can trust that this person will guide me through. And I think that's what we are supposed to be here to do, to help each other, to support each other, to guide each other. I'm here to guide you. I've experienced it. I'm sometimes, I experience it. It's life. It's a circle. Some days you experience pain, sometimes, some seasons you experience suffering. But then when you grow out of it, your experiences are to glorify God. So you are to be the testimony. So you tell people that, oh, God did this in my life. Even though I was in this season of suffering, it became better. And I think the more we urge ourselves into discovery and trying to figure out how to trust God in these seasons, the better, we experience that pain, because we know that it's only temporary. It's not for a long period. It's short. It's just a short amount of time. So with that, I would say dealing with pain and suffering isn't easy. I've churned out a lot of information and You can, go back and listen over again when you're in seasons of pain. You can also go back and, like, down below, you can click and follow on to self love and really discover what it means to love yourself, because that's all you can do. The truth is, in this life, that's all you can do. Learn to love yourself and learn to accept the situations you're in and look for the lessons so that you can grow beyond it. I'm so grateful for you tuning in this time. Please share around with your friends, share around with your family. And if you know anyone who's going through a season of pain, or if you are going through a season of pain, I pray that God will come and comfort you and send the Holy Spirit to comfort you in this season, to lead you, to guide you, and to direct your mind into a place of peace. I pray that peace that surpasses all human understanding will dwell in your life, in your soul, in your homes, in the mighty name of Jesus. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week. God bless. Bye.